Hey, 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 it's Jonas and welcome to Dave Takes It On. Today we're going to take a look at some of the questions that our viewers have posted on the channel to see what Dave has to say. Sit back and enjoy. What use are UltraRapid Chargers at supermarkets when I can just charge at home?
No use whatsoever. If I had a Sainsbury's open up a mile or two down the road and it introduced 15 150 kilowatts ultra-rapid chargers, I'd never use them. It's not meant for me. If you can charge at home and you do average UK mileage, you never charge anywhere else. So you would not use your local supermarket. They're not meant for people who can charge at home. If they were, they'd be priced down about 8p, so they were competitive with charging overnight, or 6p. They don't do that. These are money makers. So what they're designed for is for people who can't charge at home, who shop at Sainsbury's once a week. You see, everyone complains, I've got to sit around for hours waiting for my car to charge. The first fact they don't know is that the average time now on a rapid charger is 40 minutes. So on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, Saturday night, whenever you go supermarket shopping, typical shopping trip will take an hour. If you can't charge at home and you have an EV, go to your normal supermarket, plug your car in when you arrive, go and do your shopping. When you come out, your car will be full. That's who it's meant for. And so all those people who say they can't charge, go to your local supermarket, you can charge. Now, you'll also find that maybe they're going to be used in a different way. You can at the moment, for example, stop off at, if you're on a road trip, stop off at a motorway services. You'll find McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, you'll find Starbucks and everything else. But some people don't like that. Some people want better or less. So what some people will probably do is just come off the motorway, they'll find the local supermarket so they can go and buy a meal deal. I've done that on many occasions. And if that supermarket has 150 kilowatt chargers there, well, I'm in the supermarket picking the meal deal I want and picking what drink I want with it and everything else. And I have a wander around, maybe go to the toilet, have a pee. By that time, my car's full again. So I think some of these supermarkets will be used as charging hubs off a motorway. But we'll see on that. If they're going to come in with a sensible price, they will be used like that. If they're going to just try and rip off the market and charge 79p or 75p, they're not going to be used for that. At the moment, there are very few supermarkets doing it anyway, but once one does it, if Tesco, for example, finds that people who used to shop at Tesco on a Friday night are now going to Sainsbury's because the shopping's a bit dearer, they can charge the car while they're there, then Tesco are going to start introducing ultra-rapid chargers as well. So will Morrison, so will Asda, so will Booths, so will all the others. And so in time, supermarkets are very, very, very competitive. So if they see that the amount of people coming and visiting the stores is dropping, and they can put that down to people charging at a different supermarket because the prices are lower, then that supermarket will drop their prices below that level. Supermarkets are very competitive. So in time, when Sainsbury's have spread this out and have got thousands of chargers out there, in time when people start using them on a regular basis, not me, but people who can't charge at home, then you're going to find there's going to be a bit of a price war developing between the supermarkets. And that's absolutely brilliant because prices will come down. So long term, I think they're brilliant. Not for me, but they are for an awful lot of people.
Do Uber drivers expect you to wait an hour when they're charging their EV?
Oh, we do get some funny responses, don't we? Any Uber driver who expects his customers to sit in a car waiting an hour while he charges should not use that Uber driver. I can't say what the rule is. I don't know the work practice or anything, but if I was an Uber driver and I was earning my living from using my car as an Uber car, then I would guarantee every night before I went home, I would top my car up to full so the next morning it's free. One of the reasons for that is I understand you can be called out for special jobs. So why would you go home with an empty state of charge when you might be called out? Then you've got to go and find a charger before you can get to your customer. So first thing first, I would always, if I was an Uber driver, charge up the night before. That's it, full stop. If you have to, if during the day you do a lot of miles, Everyone's entitled to a lunchtime. I believe with Uber, I've never done it, but I believe with Uber, you can just log out and say you're on lunch or you're finished for the day or whatever it is. And so if throughout the morning you've done an excessive mileage and your battery is getting a little bit low, I would take a lunch break. I would go and have a lunch at a place where there's a charger, and I would plug it in for half an hour while I was having lunch. Now, the average time people spend at a charger is 40 minutes for non-Teslas and 25 minutes for a Tesla. These, most of the Ubers now are Teslas because there's a special deal on. So while you have lunch, half an hour, you can take your car back up almost to full, maybe to full, depends how many miles you've done, and then you're ready for the afternoon shift. I don't understand why someone would have the mentality to think that as an Uber driver, he would pull up at a charger with a customer in the back and tell the customer to wait for an hour. I don't know if this was a joke or this was real, but if it's real, well, I've got serious worries about the mental capabilities of an Uber driver. If it wasn't real, you've got your answer. But one final answer, just to ram home the point. In the UK, Uber publish all their details. There's masses and masses of pages of details about Uber. And one of the facts I took out of this, the average number of miles that an Uber driver does in a day is 100 throughout the whole of 2023. 100 mile in a day. In plain English, if you fill up the night before, you have no need to charge the next day. Different in London, they do a bit more work, there's a lot more demand, and the average mileage in London is 150. There is no Tesla I know that has a range of less than 250. None. So if you can't charge your car up the night before and get through the whole day's shift, you're doing it wrong. Sorry to be a bit blunt, but it's a silly question again.
With emergency vehicles moving over to electric, is it actually safe to have them charging their batteries all day?
Well, I think this question shows that the questioner has no idea about how EVs work. Yet in his hand, he has a smartphone. Smartphones, if you plug them in overnight, they'll only take half an hour to charge, and then they switch off. And although they're still plugged in, they're no longer charging. So you wake up in the morning, you have a full charge. Because your charging switched off when it got to full, or 90%, whatever rate it decided, it does no harm whatsoever leaving it plugged in, not charging. Now, believe it or not, EVs are even better because EVs have advanced things like battery management systems, which are more sophisticated than your average smartphone. And they have all sorts of other features like heating and cooling. So they are very, very different. But if you plugged an ambulance in all day, it wouldn't charge all day. Absolutely not. When it got up to the preset limit, and if it wasn't an LFP battery, that limit would be 75 or 80%, it would just stop charging. Still plugged in, it would stop charging. So the answer to the question is ambulances will come to no harm whatsoever for leaving it plugged in. Now, recently I went on holiday. I went over to Minorca. I had 2 weeks over there. Brilliant weather, lovely hotel, great time. My car, my Tesla, when I checked in the handbook, people often don't read them, but when I checked in the handbook, it says if you're going away for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, leave your car plugged in. So I left my car plugged in. It was set on I think it was about 60% state of charge, something like that. And I went away on holiday. It stayed plugged in for the full 2 weeks. When I came back, it was on 60% state of charge. The reason Tesla advise you to plug it in is if it goes particularly cold or if you have a heavy drain on the battery or something else goes wrong, it would be able to restart the charging. But if nothing goes wrong, it won't. So ambulances, leave them plugged in all the time. Tesla cars, leave them plugged in all the time. If they don't need it, they won't take it.
The media covered EVs not working because of the cold weather. But what about all the ICE vehicles?
Yeah, absolutely right. We really don't understand that ICE cars suffer exactly the same because guess what? They start their engines with a battery. And in the winter, those batteries perform less well. They're much more inefficient. And often, if your battery's going to fail, it will fail in the winter. Yeah, they're churning all the time. And then they just, and they die. During the winter, there are more call-outs for flat batteries than there are any other time of the year. So we all suffer when the batteries get cold. Okay? If If you've got a brand new battery, you'll get less problems. If your battery is well worn out, you'll get more problems. But it's absolutely true that EVs are not the exception. EVs do not perform that well in the coldest of winters, and ICE cars don't perform so well in the depth of the winter. They also will use a lot more fuel. They're going to have to keep the heat going. You're going to have the heat inside. So everybody suffers in the cold. Some EVs, in some circumstances, will probably suffer more than an ICE car, but we all suffer in the cold. If you're going to be exposed to that sort of cold, be prepared for it and know what to expect.
What happens if you get stuck in traffic with an electric vehicle?
Well, I don't know if any of you saw my recent video. I actually got stuck in a traffic jam. I set off. I was going to do some filming. I've got a supercharger just down the road. And at that location, there are some new apple greens. I'd filmed them when they were being installed, but I'd never gone back since they were finished. So I thought, one afternoon, I'll just nip out and go and do some filming down there. So I jumped in my car. As always, if ever there's a chance I'm driving, the car's at 75 or 80%. Always is whenever I've got a potential of going out, just forward planning. So I set off. The motorway is only a few hundred yards. I was straight on the motorway, and within a mile, I came to a grinding halt. The junction is 4 miles. I'd done a mile, I had 3 miles to go, and I came to a grinding halt. And the halt occurred just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I sat there. To cut a long story short, I got off at that junction 3 miles further on at 6:20 in the evening. I'd been there 5 hours and 20 minutes. Now, maybe you may have noticed, it's winter at the moment. It was really cold outside. It wasn't snowing, it wasn't below freezing. The temperature was down about 2 or 3 centigrade. So in my car, I had my heater on, I had my heated seat on, I had my wipers on because it was raining. I had my stereo on, everything running. Now, when I went in to the traffic jam, my mileage, I noticed it was 165 miles range. That's what I had left. I work on a range when I'm driving, not a percentage. I charge to a percentage, but when I'm driving, it's always switched to range so I can see it in miles, how far it is, just me. So when I joined the queue, it was 165 miles of range left. And when I reached the supercharger 5.5 hours later, it was reading 148. So 5 hours, heater, wipers, radios. I had Spotify on with using some of the good stereo that I've got in the car, some music blaring out. Some of the time probably had the heated window. I don't know what it was. But the car was using quite a lot, and all I lost was, 17 miles of range. 5 hours, 17 mile of range. At that rate, if I got stuck in a traffic jam in that weather, I could have been there 4 or 5 days and the battery wouldn't have gone flat. Now, in a snowdrift or in a traffic jam in the snow at minus 20 centigrade, that's probably quite different. But it's not huge. Now, if you're in a petrol car, you've got to run your engine. If you're in a snowdrift and your exhaust gets blocked, that's potentially fatal because its CO2 builds up. But again, a petrol car only has a certain amount of fuel in the tank, and when that's gone, your car shuts down. An EV has only got a certain amount of charge in the battery. When that's gone, the car shuts down. It's exactly the same. But in a typical car at about minus 20 centigrade with a full battery, your car has got about 45 hours of charge in it to keep you at a temperature of about 20 centigrade throughout the whole lot. And you do this by very clever manipulation. Your seat warmer uses a lot less energy than your heater. So you don't put your heating on for all the time. You put your seat on, you put your heated steering wheel on, and you get lovely warmth coming up. You should be dressed for bad weather. If you're not, what are you doing on the road? When it gets really cold, just switch your heating on for 20 minutes, bring the cabin temperature back up, switch it off. You could survive 2 days in a snowdrift if your battery was reasonably full when you went into it to when you come out. Probably couldn't do that in petrol.
Why should I be forced by the government to buy an electric vehicle?
I understand that, but I don't like breathing in your exhaust fumes when I'm walking my grandchildren to school. I don't like them breathing in your fumes, which are toxic, foul, stinking, carcinogenic, and my grandchildren have to breathe that. That's why you'll see outside some of the schools nowadays in the UK, we have signs saying, when you stop, turn your engine off. These cars produce fumes. All petrol cars produce fumes. All internal combustion engine produce fumes, and they are deadly fumes. So I don't like being forced into something, but I don't like being forced to breathe an unhealthy atmosphere. And the only option to petrol or diesel cars at the moment, which are the primary cause of airborne pollution in cities and even urban areas, rural areas, they're the prime source. If the only option is an EV, then I think we should all have EVs today. Would I ban petrol cars tomorrow? No, that would be silly, because we rely on our cars. However, if we had the ability to replace them, I would ban them tomorrow, but we don't. And it's going to take many years for the last of the petrol cars to feed out through the system and the new EVs to come into the system. It's hampered at the moment by a very high price of EVs, so not many people can afford them. But in time, that's going to come down into the $25,000, $30,000 range, then down to $20,000. And already in China, we're seeing cars out there, $8,000. In fact, there's a Dacia Spring in Europe, which I think is about €8,000. So these cars are coming in. You may not like driving them, but it's an alternative. So I think as the petrol cars fade away, and as EVs do come down in price and take over, and as more used EVs come on the road, we're going to achieve this anyhow. If you can come up with anything better than an EV, let's go for it. I'm absolutely happy with that. I don't specifically want an EV. What I want is a car that does not produce exhaust fumes when I'm using it. Now, if hydrogen's the answer, let's do it. If dilithium crystals are the answer, let's do it. I don't care what it is. I want all of us to drive around in cars which don't produce any fumes, any exhaust, any poisonous, toxic or carcinogenic gases out of the exhaust pipe. If we can do that, don't mind what we use instead. Now, governments in the past have had to do this as well. 1957, I think it was, the Clean Air Act. This was before we all had gas central heating, and 99% of all houses in the UK ran on coal. And at certain times of the year, the smoke from the coal was getting really bad. It's one of the reasons why they call the West Midlands the Black Country, because the airborne pollution, there was smut and everything. It's all related to that. That wasn't vehicles, by the way. This goes back longer than that, but this was all the kilns, because it was a big pottery area. Anyway, back in 1957, the smoke and the pollution got so bad, we got the smogs. And the smog is when a weather system comes in and stays over a particular area for longer than it normally would instead of passing through. And this trapped the layer of smoke within the city. And at the time, it was winter, so we got a fog. And the fog, the particles, the micro droplets of water in the fog were absorbing this smog, and we were breathing it, and it was killing people. It was literally, people were dropping down dead in the streets. And in 1957, the government said, that's it. We cannot allow our citizens to be killed in the street by airborne pollution, which we are creating. They introduced the Clean Air Act, and overnight, we were no longer allowed to burn coal. We had to burn coke. That was the only fuel at the time. Coke turned out to be dearer. However, it was clean air, but it was also more efficient. So people found, although a bag of coal was dearer, a bag of coke was dearer, they used less of it. Now, in time, along came others, phenacite, anthracite, and fuels like that, which were smokeless and much more energy dense. So we have in the past introduced laws or policies that are designed to protect the citizens of the UK, even if that upsets some or all of the people. And exactly the same with cars. Governments today cannot sit back and let their population die just to please motorists who drive around in their petrol or diesel cars. They can't do it. We've had already one coroner's report which stated that airborne pollution, because of the location of this house to the traffic, to this young girl, who unfortunately lost her life, entirely down to airborne pollution. So we're starting to see that. We also get reports from the NHS which simply says 50,000 extra deaths a year prematurely are caused by airborne pollution. And the biggest source of airborne pollution is car exhaust fumes. Just as a quick point, during the COVID lockdowns, cars were taken off the road. Car use dropped by 90%. It just about virtually stopped essential people only. And during that time, there was an immediate impact on the air that we breathe within the cities. And there was an immediate impact in the number of people who turned up at hospital with the sort of respiratory diseases that airborne pollution causes. We know if you take the pollution out of the air, we will be healthier. We will live a longer life. And at some point, the government has to outlaw petrol cars. But they're doing it in stages. So petrol cars, diesel cars, they have to go simply because they're killing the population. How quickly that happens, we don't know. I suspect it's going to be really quite quick, but we'll find out.
Well, thanks very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe and click the notification bell so we can notify you next time we launch a video. And a massive thank you to all our Patreon supporters. It is your support that enables us to go out and make these videos for you. So thank you very much for your contribution. I'm Dave.